Welcome, everyone, to another Singularity Syndicate podcast episode. This is Naja, your host. And today we're going to talk about securing nations and organizations in the age of AI and quantum computing. So, in this age of AI and quantum computing, supremacy in these fields will dictate global leadership. The first to unlock AGI, or what's called superintelligence, will wield unparalleled world shifting power. Concurrently, potent AI tools on quantum computing technologies could spell disaster to any company of any size. So, how could nations and enterprises fortify themselves in this high stake digital chessboard? I'm delighted today to be joined with cybersecurity professor Danny Chung to attempt to answer these questions. Welcome, Danny, again to the program. I'm delighted that you're here, and please, if you can share with us your cybersecurity journey and what motivated you to specialize in this field.
Thank you, Naja. Thank you for having me here. I'm thrilled to be here again. Your podcast and everything that you do is amazing. All the interesting topics that you all always touch on. So my name is Danny Chung. I hold an MBA in cybersecurity and supply chain management. I also hold several different GX certs, GCIA, GCIH, GSEC, and the Security Plus. And I'm currently studying for the CISSP. Right, so I do have a Medium, if you could share that as well, right? That I do blog on somewhat of a frequent basis, right? And if you want to know more, you could always see what I'm up to. I also do have published peer review academic journals out there. I've presented at academic conferences as well. I did some work on blockchain and its applications and so on years ago, right? Currently, I am an adjunct at the University of Redlands, and I'm also job hunting for a full-time position in information security, right? It's a constantly changing field. I spent, I would say, maybe the last 6 years or so, right? Just focusing on information security, being very active on forums, publishing articles, consulting, participating on CTFs and hackathons, and working on various certifications, right? These are very important in this particular field. And so what I've sort of like in this field or really do motivate me to continue is that it's a field that you never stop learning, right? There's always something new. There's always new vulnerabilities, new tools, new techniques, new standards and frameworks, right? And then there's new technologies such as AI and quantum computing that comes into the fray, right? And there's game changers happening, right? There's constant motion of things. So this is really good for someone like me who is really having that motivation to learn and that hunger to learn. And this is great, right? This is absolutely something that I cannot complain about, right? And to think about it, this is not a field for those who just want to clock in and clock out and just they're out of it, right? This is not for them, right? So this is very much a culture. It is a lifestyle. You are 24/7 with this particular mindset. You don't change from that. You don't clock out of work per se, right? But it is a constant thing, right? You do have a good work-life balance if you would like to, but you always have this security mindset in mind. So I'll turn it over to you. That's all I had for.
Absolutely. I love what you talked about, the mindset, because I think one of my courses that I took during my master's in information systems that I'm still pursuing was when there's a simulation of a cyber threat.
Mhm.
And you can always see that as a trend. Like they would call the CISO, or the cybersecurity chief information system information. What's CISO stand for?
CISO, so it is Chief Information Security Officer.
Correct. So they call them always in the middle of the night, or
Mhm.
like 3 in the morning or whatever. It's like a doctor's job basically, or an emergency surgeon, doctor that they're called in the middle of the night to respond to crisis. And you're right, like it's your typical job. So before we delve into this exciting topic, I want to toss a question to the audience. And I'm sure that a lot of us like work for companies, but we don't know like how secure our companies are. So I'm just gonna ask question about your country. Like, I know that we're now in the US and a lot of our audience are in the US, but whoever is watching from elsewhere, do you feel that the US or whatever country you belong in is ready for AI and quantum threats? And do you think your country is prepared to deal with such a threat? So, if you're listening, I appreciate your interaction. And now we shall start our exciting journey in tackling these big questions. And I'm sure that a lot of people will be like intimidated by the how deep these technologies are, and a lot of us don't really understand these technologies pretty well. So let's start with AI. So what do you think the threats coming from AI? How do you describe them? What are they?
So AI, well, it's nothing new in terms of AI, but generative AI seems to be something that has been on top of mind recently, right? I'm sure you are very familiar with this, right? And so things are getting a little more, how do you put it, a little more complicated in that, or okay, maybe not complicated, but more sophisticated in a way where attackers can craft emails, phishing emails, a lot better, right? They have much more scalability in terms of volume, scalability in terms of velocity, and just being able to send out large amounts of really really good phishing emails, right? And there's also deepfakes as well, right? Think about the phone calls, the scammers, the videos. They just got more sophisticated. They're much more polished. They're more real, quote unquote. And then that goes into the social engineering part as well, right? Being able to spot out these things that are, hey, that's a red flag, right? This is a phishing email, or this is whatever, right? Being able to differentiate that is a lot more difficult now to the human eye, right? Then we have to play defense on our side to be able to defend against those by using AI to tackle that, right? So social engineering also in terms of being more efficient and being more effective, because people, since they don't, they're not able to differentiate a really good phishing email from a real email, they might just automatically click on the link. All right. So and it's more, how do you put it, they're more smoother in their language, they're sleeker, they're more articulate, they're, and then we also have smishing, right? The smishing being SMS phishing, right? So they're targeting those as well. You might get more text messages, and it sounds like it's coming from a company that you shop with, right? A store that you shop with. And it seems to be very effective because people are clicking these links. And in terms of a business perspective, in an enterprise, employees at all levels need to be more aware of this, right? And they have to be trained properly, right? Um, so at all levels, in that, everyone from your sales team to your CEO to everyone, right, who's getting emails, they have to be able to understand why and how to protect the company that they're working for, right? It's not just a awareness thing, not just throwing training at them, but you have to create a behavior, right? That okay, now we know what we're looking for, this is what we are supposed to do, and then you enforce that behavior. And then on the next level of where you would want to train your people in terms of being aware, is to develop a culture, right? Having that culture of okay, I believe that this is something that we can do, right? This is, hey, you shouldn't be clicking on that. We believe, being like in marketing, we call it a net promoter score, right? You're not only doing it yourself, but you are emanating that to other people as well. So creating that culture of knowing how to respond to certain things like that.
Yeah, we're definitely gonna go more deeper into what organizations could do? Because you've been on this show before, and we were talking about personal security, like how a person could protect themselves, and you did an amazing job in simplifying to us how would an individual protect themselves, basic cybersecurity stuff, and we talked about the balance between convenience versus security. But today's episode is more on like organization level, on government level, nation level, like on the big players there, and how they can do it. And I think what you said about like instilling a culture of cybersecurity within everybody is vital, because as you said before, the people are the weakest link, and we're going to talk more about that. But what AI brings to the table in terms of threats is, as you mentioned, scalability in terms of producing all of these phishing emails and making making them sound like a human is sending them. Same when it comes to the other like deep fakes. Deep fakes, you might receive a call from your boss. Could you talk more about this stuff, like the threats in more of like concrete examples of,
Mhm.
if I'm working in a company, like how would I get scammed?
Right. So, say for example, you receive an invoice, right? Say for example, you are opening emails and you receive an invoice and you need to pay for something, right? Your invoices look so real. It could look like it's coming from an internal source. It could be something that the AI is able to generate certain things that looks very, very legitimate, right? And you can't tell the difference, right? And that becomes a problem, because how well are your people trained to spot these if it's coming from internal? If someone, say for example, hacks into one of your employees through a phishing email, they get control of their email. They're using that email to message your other employees and try to gain what we call lateral movement, right? You try to get more accounts and try to eventually reach a administrator or so account, and then take over whatever resources that particular company may have, or whatever data they could exfiltrate, right? So we've seen that happen many times, where PDFs as well may have stuff embedded in them, and so that could start off the whole chain of these attacks. Um, Also, I think you also touched on deepfakes as well, right? I did probably. So deepfakes in terms of say your boss calls you and says, "Hey, um, we're moving towards a different technology, or we're shutting down our servers for 50% of our servers, or you and your team have the night off." Imagine if your boss calls you and tells you that, especially since we're working remotely. You're not in front of your boss and having that person tell you, right? So once that happens and you say, "Oh, okay, I'm going to take my night off because my boss told me," well, what are you going to do? You're going to take a night off, right? And then you have a skeleton team in the organization that these hackers could come in and attack, right? Just an example, right? But this is something that can really happen, right? Or they say, "Hey, shut down some of the servers. We don't need these tonight," and they just happen to be servers where that you have stuff that is critical to defending your organization, right? So um,
Right.
being able to spot that and say, "Hey, that doesn't seem right, or that doesn't sound right. Let me go ahead and confirm. Let me check with my team." Your team has to be aware, right? So that's really
Absolutely.
important.
No, that's scary but wonderful that you're mentioning all of this. Now, when it comes to quantum, so again, we explained what are the threats coming from AI. And now, when it comes to quantum computing, what are the new types of threats? But before that, maybe you could also explain a little bit what is quantum computing and
Sure.
how could that affect cybersecurity?
So I'm not an expert in quantum computing, so I'll just throw that out. So I'll try my best to describe it. So in a classical computer, we store bits of data, and it processes data, right? So it's either in a state of one or a zero, right? So it's on or off, right? So zero being off, one being on, right? So with quantum computing, it's at both states at the same time, represented by qubits, right? I know it gets a little jargony and everything, but so using an analogy, all right. So imagine with a classical computer, it's represented by you as a person walking on a flat field, right? And you have a limit on how fast you can walk and how much distance you can walk, right? So distance and your limitations of where you can walk to. With a more modern computer, think of this as a regular car, right? You could drive further, you could drive faster than if you were walking, and maybe you have something like a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, and think of this as your supercomputer, right? So lots of horsepower. You could go very fast on the road. You could go new places that you otherwise would not be able to walk to that new territory, right? A quantum computer is not a faster car. It is a boat. It is a ship, right? It is a totally different terrain that you're traversing, right? And that boat could take you to new places, right? And the thing is, we don't even know what's in the water, right? How deep is the water? What are animals in the water? What are things in the water? We don't know that, right? So these are problems that are very novel to us, right? Very new. We have no idea, right? There's unknown islands out there that eventually we can explore with this new technology, but at this point we don't know what to do with it fully as yet. The full potential of the applications, the full potential of what the technology can do, how it evolves, we don't know enough about it, right? We're just touching the tip of the iceberg at this particular point, right? And so with that is with that established, we have an understanding of, okay, so quantum computing is a totally different thing. Now, this changes a lot of things in terms of technology in cybersecurity, because we have what we call encryption, right? Encryption in terms of trying to protect our information with these algorithms, right? That you can't read it if it's encrypted, right? Attackers get this data, but they can't, unlock it basically. And so being able to crack that with quantum computers becomes a much easier task now, right? So for example, there's an algorithm called RSA, right? It's an asymmetric algorithm that uses something called prime factorization. You're using a large prime number, and you're splitting the two prime numbers that making up that particular number, right? So if you multiply those two prime numbers together, you could get that large number, but doing it the other way around is very, very difficult, right? Given that large number, it's very difficult to split those two numbers. And so for computers, that becomes difficult. But for quantum computers, that becomes much easier, right? You have the ability to crack that, right? So a lot of these algorithms, especially like RSA, they're able to how to put it, to be safeguarding your information, because computers take a very difficult time to crack these. But with quantum computing, this changes, right? So I know IBM and Google, they're on the forefront of developing quantum computers, right? So I'm relatively sure that other maybe nation states have the resources as well, that they are developing this technology. They're just not saying it, right? They're just keeping it under wraps because of that, and they might be the first to beat Google or IBM to creating this, and they may be using the quantum computing to crack the present algorithms that we're using today, right? So think about all your top secret stuff and your communications and so on that are present today. If they're able to crack that, you gotta think what secrets are floating out there as well, right? We don't know enough to be confidently say that they have it or they don't have it, but it's gonna come eventually, right?
I mean, think about this, because I'm glad you touched on this. Like, imagine like Putin, right? Like he has unlimited amount of resources under his belt, and Russia is always known for their notorious in terms of cybersecurity. But imagine Putin got achieved a quantum computer, right? Who can crack like any firewall or any, you can hack any place basically, and then they got hold of the nuclear arsenal of the US. I mean, just hypothetically, I know it's not that easy. I'm hoping it's not that easy, but let's say it happened, and now like we've got like a huge I would say apocalyptic
Mhm.
problem at our hand. Um, because he can fire nuclear weapons and blame the U.S. for doing it because it's a new it's a U.S. nuclear weapons. But how would a country like the U.S. protect against stuff like that?
So for something like nuclear, that's at the very, very, center of so many layers of protection. So it's not as easy to break into, and gain remote control of something like that, right? So that would be at the very, very peak of prizes, the holy grail, basically, if you will. But I don't think that's within the realm or within the scope yet, right? Even if you are
Mm.
able to crack, with somebody as algorithms, it's not as easy, right? There's a lot of these systems as well, are intentionally analog, so
Mm.
it's not something that you can, remote in easily just like that, right? So, but maybe with social engineering, it's possible, right? Because you have people who, think of those movies where you have two people turning a key at the same time to launch a nuclear missile or something like that, right? So,
Yeah, I read in one of my AI books. I've been constantly reading AI books for like the last 5 years or so. And one of the books I read is that how AI could be the most influential friend. It can have a lot of empathy and can. Have you watched the movie Her or something?
oh yeah, I've watched her already. It was a long movie.
Yeah, and it's like how it manipulates the person and convince them that she loves them and stuff like that, and then uses that emotion to control and get what she wants. And AI could be very strong in that because
Mhm.
it's trained on all the internet and how we communicate with each other. So it's an expert communicator. It understands emotions, even though whether it feels them or not is a different story, but it understands how we communicate emotions. And it's hard for you to like if someone tells you like all the right things. Let's say one of these people guarding a big nuclear facility, let's say, and they had recently lost their wife or their girlfriend or whatever, let's say, or vice versa, they lost their boyfriend or husband. So imagine this AI could be the most empathetic friend and tell you like, oh, I'm a friend of your wife, and she was great, and then immediately you got access to their secret world, right? And then they start like sharing with each other, and then all of a sudden you developed a lot of trust. And because it's very realistic, you feel that you're compelled to continue and to strengthen that relationship. And there you go, like that's an entry point for something like that. So social engineering is definitely a huge part of cybersecurity. And that's why what you said about culture, where like companies and organizations should instill a culture of cybersecurity, like not only the people in IT should be aware of this stuff. I think people across the organization should receive multiple trainings. And I think
Mhm.
this kind of video, like, or this podcast that we're doing right now, is could be used as a way to have the general public aware of all of this stuff and protect not only themselves but also the organizations they're working at. I have some people in the chat saying, like, for example, Lord, um,
Lord of Castle.
yeah, he's saying about like how the CEO of ChatGPT, Sam Altman, has gone before Congress to try to regulate AI within the US, which is, by the way, what do you think of AI regulation? Do you think it should be regulated or it should not?
I think there is a
I know, like, it's a step out of yeah, I think we lost Danny for a minute until he reconnects. Yeah, he's back with us. Mm. Yeah, so in this time, yeah, I agree. Personally, I think AI should be regulated. I don't think I have a position at this point, because like if depends how what kind of regulations we do with AI. This is a very delicate topic, because if one country regulated AI and another country did not, so then what, like then we don't have a clear understanding of it. So I'm still trying to get Danny back with us. All right. So we received another comment from AP. I never considered about work in the IT field for the need to learn code, but the cybersecurity is threat assessment management. Would it still be difficult to compete for a job without coding skill? I would think that coding in general is less and less being required because of generative coding tools like ChatGPT and other tools. Danny, you're back with us?
Yes, there we go.
I'm glad. Yeah, so I was trying to answer AP when she or he or they are saying that could we still compete for cybersecurity jobs without coding skills? And I was thinking that recently I actually developed myself. I'm not a coder, and I developed myself a Chrome extension, plugin, and it worked perfectly. And I did it with zero. I mean, I have a little bit of coding knowledge, but not that great. But I followed the instructions of ChatGPT, and it worked. It took some iterations and back and forth, but I was able to generate a software with almost very little coding knowledge. So I would say that in the future, coding will less and less be required for most jobs, I would say. What do you think, Danny?
So I just want to clear a few things here. So IT and security are usually clumped up into one, but they're not necessarily the same thing, right? So think of IT as, let's use an analogy, right? Like an event, right? You're hosting an event, right? IT is, say, the people who set up the chairs, set up the tables, and so on, the equipment, all the physical equipment. Security is people safeguarding the people sitting on those chairs or the stuff that is on those tables. So that's your data. That's what that's what security is about. Security doesn't really necessarily touch on the physical stuff like you're setting the chairs, but you have to have knowledge of what the chairs do, what the tables are, and so on. I hope that's a good analogy. IT deals with a lot of that other stuff. Security is much more specialized. It's very niche to one particular area. But then within cybersecurity, then within that, it's very broad in terms of the amount of different things within cybersecurity, right? So if you want to get into coding, that's fine. That's one area of it. If you're doing, software development, that is another field, right? Software development, coding, programming, that's another field. It has overlaps with security, but it's not security entirely, right? So I also like to use the analogy of cybersecurity being very broad. Think of building a house, right? There's tiling, there's painting, there's roofing, there's plumbing, there's so many different things, right? In security, and so there's like an umpteen number of jobs almost, right? It's a very wide field. I wouldn't say umpteen, but there's a lot of things that you can do. There's different roles, right? So coding is not necessarily in all those roles, but you still need to have a concept of what security is, what we call the CIA triad, right? Which is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability. You have to have that in cybersecurity. Confidentiality meaning you protect information from unauthorized people or entities, right? Um, Integrity meaning how is that information you're looking at? Is it authentic? Is it true? Is it is it unmodified, right? So if a hacker is able to intercept your communication and then forward the information to someone else and say it's from you, then they're modifying, they're tampering with it, right? Integrity protects against something like that. And then availability is the ability to access the resources, right? If you are able, your team is able to access their computer while they they are working, right? So that's availability. If a hacker comes in and they hack into your server and do some sort of like a DDoS, what we call distributed denial of service, they block you out of your servers, or they crash your website, that takes away the availability. Right, that's a high level overview of what cybersecurity is. So
I'm glad you said that, how big cybersecurity is. It's like the field of medicine, right? Like there's the pediatrics and there's the surgery, the heart, and then all of these different components that work together. And for example, like my degree, my master's is in data science, and I had some cybersecurity courses within the data science, because like imagine like there are some tools, data science tools, that analyze all the traffic coming in to the website and coming out, and then spotting patterns of that data is also part of cybersecurity. So it's not, there's a lot of intricacies that it's going to take a long time to really explain all of them. But thank you, AP, for the question. Before we move on, we also have a comment from Eric. Thanks again for all the support. Now, Danny, we have explained the threats coming from AI, and we have explained the threats coming from quantum computing. Now, what are the threats coming from them combined?
that's up for debate in terms of what new territories we can do, right? I mean, think of so for example, I think I did mention that we could crack the conventional, or what we have right now in terms of encryption, right? So quantum computing, because it's a constant arms race, right? It's defense and attack, and think of medieval times where it's like swords and armor. You have bigger swords, heavier swords, you have thicker armor now, right? Now you protect against that, and it just goes back and forth, right? And so same thing with technology today. In cybersecurity, you have quantum computing being a somewhat of a game changer, right? And so we have to develop quantum resistant cryptography. So we have stuff like newer algorithms like Crystal Kyber, Crystal Dilithium, Falcon, Saber. There's so many different new ones that NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology, is sort of pushing out, or having competitions as well to people, security researchers, to create new technology to submit and to be scrutinized by the security community, and to be scrutinized from security researchers, right? To be able to see if it can withstand different attacks, and if it could be cracked, or so on. There's many submissions towards it. Some have been going into the final stage, and then someone comes up with something that it's a major vulnerability with the algorithm, and then it's just sort of thrown out, right? So you're no longer able to stand the test of these security researchers, right? This has happened before, right? This is something that we've constantly had previously that is now a standard, right? So there's an algorithm called AES, right, that the government uses, and it's pretty much the gold standard, right? When it started first, it was a competition, and then there's different people who submitted their algorithms to see whether it's something that could be the standard, right? So today that's what we use, right? So AES is a gold standard. There's different bit lengths that we could use for the longer the bit length for the key, the better, the more secure it could be. But at the same time, it's a compromise that we have to think about, because it uses more computing power, right? So back to your question about AI and quantum computing. Think about I know we mentioned about deepfakes and so on. I think we had a Mid-Journey video that I sent to you. Can you play that real quick?
Sure.
This is why you should avoid mixing Barbie with biased AI image generators. What does a typical prisoner look like? What about a lawyer, a nurse, a drug dealer? What about a fast food worker, a cleaner, a terrorist, or a CEO? These are all images created by an artificial intelligence image generator called Mid-Journey, which creates unique images based off of simple word prompts. These exaggerated biases that AI systems create are known as representational harms. These are harms which degrade certain social groups by reinforcing the status quo or by amplifying stereotypes. A particularly extreme example was created when BuzzFeed published an article of AI-generated Barbies from different countries around the world. The Barbies from Latin America were all presented as fair-skinned, perpetuating a form of discrimination known as colorism, where lighter skin tones are favoured over darker ones. The Barbie from Germany was dressed in clothes reminiscent of an SS Nazi uniform, and the Barbie from South Sudan was depicted holding a rifle by her side. We need to be educated and intentional about how we use AI image generators. As computer scientist and digital activist Joy Balamwini puts it, whether AI will help us reach our aspirations or reinforce unjust inequalities is ultimately up to us. What are some examples of representational harms you've come across recently?
Absolutely, and there was also a huge documentary. I forget what is it called, but I'll try to put the link for it in the description. That we were talking about all of these biases, and
so it touches on something really important, right? So it's I always refer to garbage in, garbage out, right? It's always something, and bias is inherent in a lot of these things that we do. It's difficult to be 100% objective because we as humans are inherently biased in one way or another. It's difficult to have a straight down the middle sort of objective view on things. And like the video mentions, right, it's inherent biases that could further further split views, right, or people who are agreeing and not agreeing. And I think I also want to touch on something important, and you mentioned this as well in terms of like nation states, right? One of the things a lot of nation states are doing is being able to control information and being able to disseminate information that they deem as something that they want as part of their strategy. At the same time, they could disseminate disinformation and misinformation to their adversaries to sow doubt or to sow mutiny or what have you, to have those people be very against their own leadership, right? Or their stuff like that constantly happening. Is constantly happening. And in the last several years, I think we've seen a lot more of this information being put out, right, on things like 5G. Have people going there and burning 5G towers, right, and saying that it's harmful to us and stuff like that, right? It's there with no scientific basis, right? And so it's a very strong tool that nation states can use, right, to do that.
So just to summarize what we've done so far. So we've say, okay, AI is presenting a lot of threats. Quantum computing is presenting a lot of threats. And together, they kind of complete each other. I feel that imagine like you're a handyman, right? Like you have a tool belt, and you have like the hammer and you have the screwdriver. And it's like AI and quantum computing are one and the other. Like you have the hammer. If you have like some sort of hard to crack code or whatever, you could use your quantum computer. And if you need massive phishing emails and social engineering, you will use AI. So it's kind of like for the hacker, it's like the dream is coming true. He or she has all the tools at their disposal to launch a successful attack. Combine this with an army, combine this with a crazy dictator or whatever, combine this with a cyber war or an attack, then you have like the ultimate cyber threat, right? And now I started the podcast talking about whoever unlocks AGI first, which is artificial general intelligence, and whoever reaches by the way, there's differences between AGI and super intelligence. So AGI is an artificial general intelligence, and super intelligence is more like the singularity. And I'm going to explain a little bit about the differences. So AGI is potentially the next step. And some people argue that we already are in the AGI phase, whereby we have established a general intelligence, because all the previous AIs were very narrow AI, like AI in specialized in one field, like AI to diagnose X-rays. This is a narrow AI. AI that drive cars is a narrow AI, right? But then once you have stuff like GPT-4 and add to it an agency, like add an agentic GPT-4, which means that GPT-4 can actually do things on the internet. Now we're having a general AI, because GPT-4 or ChatGPT or Bard or all the other generative AI systems, they can pretty much have knowledge in a lot of different variety of areas, and they can reason, they can understand, and they can function. So I would assume AGI is very close. I wouldn't be surprised if we have AGI in the coming 2 years from now, whereby we have a very diverse intelligence that can match a human being. Now, super intelligence is when this AGI could start exceed the human intelligence by areas of magnitude. We're talking about, like, okay, at first it will be Einstein versus us. And then because of the exponential curve of how these technologies evolve, now you're talking about like exponentially doubling their ability to be smart and to be intelligent. And now you're talking about the intelligence, we will be the intelligence of a fly compared to us become the super intelligence. So imagine we are the super intelligent AI, and then the human intelligence is like the intelligence of a fly. And this is what people are being afraid of as being a monumental power, and monumental, like it could be the end of humanity easily. And that's why all of these people are talking about AI safety and all of this stuff. But now, as we are progressing towards that future, adverse countries who are like, because for example, now it seems that the US is leading, because all of this is coming from companies in the US, but we don't know what other countries have. For example, China and Baidu, they have this company. Baidu is like producing AI, and there's many others, but we don't know like where are they in their development, because they're not releasing to the public. But let's say other countries who want to have this technology but don't have the capabilities to build it themselves, so they might choose to hack into one of these companies and steal their AI. And now we're coming to this question about, it is in the national security interest of a country like the US to make regulations to protect AI companies. So how would we do that? How would we be able to protect high-stake AI companies, do you think?
That's a very good question. I don't really have a direct answer to that, right? It has to do a lot with policy. It has to do a lot with putting or allocating the resources towards the protection and defense of these companies, right? Because when you're a private enterprise, you have a certain amount of resources. Even if you are Apple, right? You have quite a big market cap, and you have quite a big budget for your stuff. You still can't compete against your nation states, right? They have a lot more resources than you. They have armies of engineers, of security engineers, software engineers that they can at their disposal to create malware to break into your system, right? It's difficult for private sector to do that, and you really do need government to step in and try to help protect these certain companies, right? Because if these technologies do get leaked out, who's to say it's not already leaked out? You're going to have a lot of issues down the line, right? Like you mentioned, right? You have AI being in the hands of tyrants and dictators, right? What else could, what things they could think of to do, right? And I'm a strong believer that World War III would start off in cyberspace, right? It starts off with cyber security or cyber warfare, as opposed to having a conventional physical weapons that we would use, right, in a traditional sense. Crippling your infrastructure, for example, taking out your power systems, taking out your internet, taking out different portions of your critical infrastructure, your water maybe, right? When you do that, it's like laying siege on a castle, right? Back in the medieval days, you would surround the castle, you won't let anything in or out, and then you starve your enemy to death, right? Or at least try to cut them off from everything else. So same thing, right? If you cripple them in that way, you make them an easier target. And so that's something that you also should consider, in terms of enterprises as well. If they try to cripple your infrastructure and try to weaken you some other way, and then try to go and steal what they need to steal. So yeah, there's always things about things like that to think about.
Absolutely. Like speaking with about World War III, right? Maybe, and just maybe, we are in one already. Maybe right now, with the abilities of with the AI tools we have, nation states or could compete culturally as well. Like they could spread. We have the ability to, as also you mentioned in the beginning of the podcast, that we have abilities to spread misinformation at scale. This is okay. Before AI, probably you could spread a rumor here and there, but now you could have an army of AI bots who are actively on all of these social platforms, trying to divide people, trying to spread misinformation, hate between one another. And to be honest, like the US right now is like at the peak of its division. Like really, people are completely divided, and it's really hard to reconcile these differences. And I think a lot of our adversaries are interested in this kind of culture. Like they want the US to be divided. They want, because there's strength in unity, and if we're divided, then I think it's easier to beat a divided country.
Yeah, absolutely.
So so yeah, you mentioned also the crippling infrastructure. So it's a crazy out there. So now when we talk about how we can start protecting these organizations, when we talk about, okay, how could we use AI? Because again, AI could be used as like any other technology, could be used for good and could be used for bad. So when it comes to using AI for good, so how do you feel that we can protect organizations with AI?
So again, well, I will refer to the arms race that I mentioned before, right? So attackers can use AI to attack, and form new abilities to find new vulnerabilities, to find new ways to break into a particular network, or to bypass firewalls, or to what have you, right? So all these things are within their scope. Now, on the defense side, you're going to have, being able to detect these threats, right? Detect the anomalies, or detect the heuristics and behaviors of these attacks, right? Rather than a signature of a malware, you're looking at what the baseline of your system is, and then finding out, okay, is this abnormal? Maybe we should take a closer look at this. So AI would enhance your ability, or help your analysts and engineers to see things a little more clear, or make alerts to find out, okay, this is something that we should pay more attention to. This is abnormal, stuff like that. Because when we have logs, we have tons of logs, right? And being able to go through a lot of those is difficult. So you have to depend on AI to do the first skim of it, and then it gets filtered onto you, right? Um, the phishing and social engineering part, you could have AI to detect that as well. So just as you are on the offensive side, on the defensive side, you can also find what are patterns, or recognize the sort of things that these phishing emails would have, and being able to detect that, right? You're also able to use AI to what we call DFIR, um, being able to respond to attacks, incident response, being able to do digital forensics as well, to have a better set of tools to find what you need to find in a more efficient way and even more effective way as well. There's also security automation and orchestration for different things that we set up. Say, for example, there's an alert that triggers, and then because of the alert, it could automate to do a certain thing, right? To react a certain way, right? So you could have AI, and well, today's technology, you could do that already, but maybe AI could be able to enhance that or to be more efficient at that or be more accurate. So things like that could be used in the defensive side.
That's great. When it comes to like, how can we use quantum computing also to protect ourselves or our organizations?
Quantum, apart from the quantum resistant or the new algorithms that you would use for encryption, I think there's a lot of use cases that we haven't explored yet. So I like I mentioned before, I'm not an expert in quantum computing. I know, just the surface level of what it is and certain things that do affect cybersecurity. I'm not entirely sure how we could leverage that in other uses. At this point, I don't really know. Maybe you could expand a little bit of what you have read in the literature.
Yeah, I think, I'm also not an expert in quantum, but probably we should. I mean, my task would be to bring on this show, on this live stream, someone who is more knowledgeable about quantum computing. This would be a good interesting talk to really discuss quantum computing with a specialist in the field, because it's something that, now it's not, nobody's talking about quantum. Now all the hype is on AI. And speaking of hype, I'm going to share, by the way, the graph that you shared with me, which is very interesting, and ask the audience. This is the. Can you explain this first of all, because you shared
Right.
this with me, and I want to I want to poll the audience after you explain it.
So this is the Gartner hype scale. So when you have a newer technology, so think about that as your lower left portion where you start the line, right? The technology starts and it comes into the mainstream, right? And then it goes up, 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 up because it becomes a hype, right? It becomes a thing that everyone talks about, right? Everyone is very excited about it. So you go up that curve, and then eventually it gets to a peak of some point, and then it starts to drop because, say for example, like we talked about cryptography, no, not cryptography, cryptocurrency and blockchain. It was, years ago, maybe down in like 2019 and 2020, pre-pandemic, we had a lot of things talking about cryptocurrency, right?
Yeah.
And that hype was going up, and it sort of, I would imagine, it peaked at somewhere, and then it started to fall down as AI came up, right? So AI, same thing. I don't know exactly where we are at. Are we still going up? Are we still, are we going down? Are we at the peak? I am not entirely sure, because again, you have different things in AI, right? Like generative AI is definitely on the upward trend, right? And then eventually, once you get to the peak, you go straight down, and you go into a place, a trough, right? You go down, and eventually there might be applications where it plateaus on, right? Where we see use cases where we see a lot of things that can be really utilized on a larger scale and so on, right? So you're being more productive, or you're being more efficient in the things you do, not only on the hype part, but on a constant plateau basis.
Yeah. So the question for the audience is that, for example, what do you rate VR, like virtual reality? These headsets that you put, and then Apple recently also released their own VR set, and Facebook, they had the Oculus, right? So what do you think of VR, for example, on that graph? Has it reached a peak yet, or did it peak already and now it's going down? Because I think that VR is not yet. I mean, it It's really hard to form a position myself, so I don't want to influence anyone. So, what do you think of VR? What do you think of AI? What do you think of blockchain? What do you think of quantum?
Metaverse.
Yeah, metaverse, like all of these technologies. Which one is gonna peak? Are we like if we kind of draw these points on this graph? Where do you put all of these technologies that we talked about? It would be an interesting exercise to actually do and see, because some in the history of technology, for example, mobile smartphone, like the smartphone technology, this touch screen, for example, it's stuck. It reached the peak, but it wasn't a high peak because it maintained, like it's still with us till this moment. The internet, definitely. Online shopping, definitely. Um, so yeah, there's a lot of technology, but there's a lot of technologies also that died out.
There's also, I'm going to go off on a tangent a little bit.
Mm,
There's also people who have this fear that AI will replace them, right? They'll take away our jobs and so on, right? But
mm,
in reality, it's not the AI itself that will take away your job. It's just the next person who is more proficient at using AI as a tool. That person would take away your job. That person would would render you obsolete, basically, because you don't stay relevant and you don't have the ability to keep up with the times of using these tools today, right? So you have to be able to upskill and to remain relevant, right? Or else, eventually we might not be able to keep whatever we're doing the conventional way, right?
I love that. I really love that you said that. So you're gonna lose your job not for AI, but for people using AI effectively and
And then
better than
you
you.
mentioned something about prompt engineering in your previous podcast, right? So I'm sure you're very, very proficient in doing that, and you could speak on that if you would like to.
Yeah, like I'm my highest viewed podcast so far is the prompt engineering podcast with more than 15,000 views at this moment. And I'm planning also to build like the ultimate guide of prompt engineering where I'll explain it like from start to finish, A to Z. And also I'm hoping that I will create like a kind of a workshop to kind of help people and train people on AI so that they feel more empowered to tackle their jobs and their personal and professional lives equipped with this tool. So, in order to summarize things up, Danny, I know that organizations, unfortunately, including governmental or non-governmental organizations, they are spending less money on safety and security and more money on capabilities, because the problem is that you want to compete, so you want to put all your resources to develop capabilities so you can compete. And the same applies to AI. Everybody now is talking about like how the big companies are paying very little attention to AI safety. You would have a full AI company with 90% of the resources going to capabilities and probably 1 or 2% of the resources going for AI safety. When it comes to cybersecurity, I'm assuming it's the same thing. So what's your recommendations and final thoughts about that?
Can you repeat that a little bit? You just sort of, I got my mind got a
Yeah,
little distracted there.
no worries. So my question is that what are your final recommendations for organizations of all sizes, and especially when it comes to allocating resources on cybersecurity?
Right. So I think a lot of people or organizations, they don't put as much of a priority in security because it is, well, think about this, right? You have your sales team, a marketing team, and so on. They generate revenue towards your company. Security doesn't generate anything for you. It is a cost center. It is a thing that you have to pay for that doesn't generate anything for you. But it is a necessary thing in there because if you do get hacked, you are in a lot of, you're in deep water, basically, right? There is a graphic that I sent to you, Naja, if you could share that. right? So the first one we have is security budget before the breach, right? It is, basically non-existent. It's very little, right? And then when you do get hacked, your security budget after the breach is, a lot fuller, right? Now you're saying, oh wow, now we have to put more resources towards this to defend ourselves. But in reality, the data breach costs you a lot more money because you didn't initially invest that money or allocate that money towards security in the first place. So
Yes, and you lost a lot of trust. So
mhm,
whenever a company got breached, the trust diminished. And as we know, trust is like a glass; like it's
mhm,
hard to build and very easy to shatter.
right, and like especially like goodwill and reputation, if you get breached, it becomes a tarnish on you. But then again, if you also look at it, everyone's getting breached. So companies are like, oh well, so what, we got breached. That's the mentality of some of these organizations, right? It's all right if we get breached, right? You know so no, don't follow that mentality, right? That's what I'm just saying, that certain enterprises, organizations, they don't put security as a priority, think that way, and then they don't realize it until after the fact. So it becomes a reactive thing rather than a preventative thing.
Absolutely. All right. So if anyone in the audience have a question for Danny before we conclude, now it's the time. And as we wait for questions from the audience, I would like to thank you, Danny, for once again join me on this podcast. You're a close friend, and I always respect and admire your knowledge and expertise in the field. And yeah, I mean, we did, this is the second one. I hope this is a better one as I'm improving my podcasting and interviewing skills. It's a long journey. I hope that people who have been following this journey understand that and tolerate my lack of skill in that department as I'm building those skills as we go. Again, it's a fun journey, and I appreciate people like you, Danny, who supports me in this humble beginnings, really, and believed in what we're doing. And I always like to say that, what I'm trying to do is having stimulating conversations. This is my main priority. My main priority is to learn from esteemed guests like you, and take nuggets of information that will help me personally, but also like share this knowledge with the rest of the world, and whoever like is interested in this kind of information, they will benefit as well. So I mean, these conversations I would love to have. I usually have them with people like you in private, and I was like, okay, why don't we put this information in public sphere, and hopefully other people will feel inspired. So so yeah, I want to thank you, and if you have any final thoughts.
Well, since you mentioned public sphere, since we are in the public sphere, we could very much be samples of AI being used in, replicating our voice, so it's possible, right? So, like ghostwriters, right? They're writing songs with artists that they're, without their permission and everything, right? So, final tip I want to leave, more on the personal side as well. So if you do get a call from, say, a loved one or whatever, that say, hey, this is urgent, send me money, I'm in trouble or whatever, and it sounds like the person who's calling you, right? Be sure to have a safe word, right? Have a predetermined safe word where if the person really calls you, they would know the safe word, right? So if I'm calling, hey Naja, I need help. Hey, send me $1,000 because I need to buy something, right? And you ask me, hey, what's the safe word? If I don't know what the safe word is, it might not be the real person. It might not be real me being able to verify I am who I am, right? So have a safe word with your loved ones, and keep that in mind. Don't forget it, right?
That's great advice, but make sure that safe word is communicated in person,
Yes.
because if you communicate it online and already it's hacked, so then they know the safe word.
Yeah.
um yeah, people, if you want to reach Danny, he's available on LinkedIn. This is his username. You're welcome to find him. And yeah, and he is also available on Medium, and he writes all the time, and this is the link, and I'm going to try to put all of these links in the description. Until next time, everyone, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.